The BS Report with Bill Simmons. Bill Simmons is brought to you by Lamisil AT Gel. It's proven to relieve the burn of athlete's foot between the toes. Once a day, 1 week, and you're done.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Special 2-for-1 this week. We had my buddy Jacko on yesterday to discuss the Yankees and the Red Sox. And now for today, we're going to discuss one of my favorite TV shows of all time, coming to an end on Sunday. And if you don't watch The Wire, you know what? No hard feelings. Just turn this off right now, because you're about to listen to a discussion about The Wire for the next 50 minutes. Maybe even more. We might go 3 hours. Anyway, let's bring him on from FoxSports.com, Kansas City Star, the number one Wire fan on the planet, Mr. Jason Whitlock. Jason, how you doing?
Thanks, Bill. I'm doing great. And I really, of all those titles, number one Wire fan is probably most important to me.
Absolutely. And before we get into this, I just want to tell anybody listening, we're going to give away a lot of spoilers, not for the final episode, but we're going to be talking about everything that went up through episode 9. So if you haven't seen through episode 9, just stop listening right now. No offense, we won't take it personally. How you feeling? I mean, on Sunday night, all your friends go away. All these friends that you've made for the last 5 years, they're just going to leave.
It's really dramatic. I'm not kidding. I will shed tears regardless of what heartstrings are pulled, but just I am losing a great friend, and luckily I own the first 4 seasons. And will eventually own the 5th season on DVD, and so at least I'll be able to watch them again and again and again, because I do it now. I mean, I watch old episodes all the time, and every time I watch an old episode, I find something that I can't believe he showed that character in season 2, and then they became relevant in season 5 or whatever.
Right.
So,
yeah, there's so many. It's such a meticulously planned out show, and I think that's what separates it from The Sopranos. Is I really don't feel like there was a wasted scene in 5 years with The Wire. Like, every scene had a purpose.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I just saw there was in this season 5, there was a girl that started the first scene of one of the episodes. She was in that little deal with Bubbles, and it was a little white girl that told the story about, hey, I said when I first started using drugs, I'd never turn tricks, and I said I'd never do this, and all the things I said I wouldn't do, blah, 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 I ended up doing. And then one day I was watching season 3, and she's in this one little scene. She pulls up in Amsterdam, sitting in the back of the car to buy some heroin. And she's on screen for like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, I've seen her. I was like, oh my God. They just show. So, I mean, it's amazing. Have you seen the deal where they foreshadowed Kennard killing Omar in season 3?
I was just going to say, yeah, it's on YouTube. The little kid who eventually kills Omar, what is it, season 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the same episode that Bump chews out Omar. But they show Omar had killed somebody, and they show the little kids, and Kennard grabs the gun, and he's like, no, I get to be Omar. I actually just read an interview with the kid who played Michael. I forget what Tristan Wilds. I forget. His name is something like that. But it was on TV Guide, and he was saying that there's another scene that foreshadows Omar's death, like in season 3, I guess, when Omar says something like, it's a kid that says something to him, and he says something like, oh, that's okay, he's a kid, or like he just discounts like a kid being a threat, and it was like this little secret foreshadowing. But to me, the difference with there's a lot of differences with The Sopranos and The Wire, and I don't think we'll ever fully be able to figure out why one show became such a pop culture phenomenon, and the other, like The Wire last year wasn't even nominated for any Emmys.
Well, I don't even. There's no mystery in that. It's like the reason why anything becomes this big commercial. McDonald's doesn't make the best hamburgers.
Right.
Wendy's does, but McDonald's makes them quicker, and they got better marketing. And whatever, and they were first in, and so.
But it's the same network, though.
Same network, but it's the show is. Some people don't take the time to get into The Wire. When you start talking about the majority audience, the show is probably too black, and the language is something they can't keep pace with in terms of, they don't understand a lot of times what's getting said. So it takes some investment. You got to want to understand The Wire, or you got to stick with it for a long enough time to really get it and understand it and enjoy it. So if you're just a casual viewer, it just might be too much for you.
Yeah, you can't jump in like in season 3. You got to start from the first episode, and in my opinion, you have to watch, I think, 3 or 4 before you get in the groove. Or it might latch onto you earlier than that, but I think until the third one.
I think it's the first season. I don't think for people that aren't fascinated by that lifestyle, that culture, I don't think it. And given the show to friends of mine who watch it with their wives or girlfriends now, I don't think they're all the way hooked until Wallace gets killed. Right. Once Wallace gets killed in season 1, then it's like, oh my God.
What episode was that? Was
Probably
that like the last
9 or something like that?
Yeah, I was going to say for me, the episode for me that I realized that I was in for good, and I loved it anyway, but the scene when Kima gets shot, that episode, I think it was like episode 10 or episode 11, and The Wire was just it was so methodical, and you're waiting for stuff to happen. And when that whole scene blew up and she got shot and you thought she was going to die, and I don't think I've ever been more invested in a show like from that moment on, because I just was like having a heart attack not knowing what was going to happen to her. But I'll say here was my reason that I didn't get into it right away, because I've been pretty upfront. Like I was late to the party and ended up jumping into it on demand. But the reason I didn't start watching it was because it was done by the same people who did The Corner. And I had actually watched The Corner. It was just too depressing for me. I just couldn't handle it. And, I just didn't think it was entertaining. I mean, it was certainly true to real life, and, it was grisly, and it was all the stuff that needed to be shown, but I just didn't like it. And for whatever reason, I just made the assumption that The Wire was going to be too close to that world, and I just didn't want to go there. And then just over and over, people telling me that I had to watch it, and then finally I just kind of succumbed to it,
And The Corner, it's an acquired taste as well.
Right.
And I'll just say, and I don't know what your family history, but it's like The Corner, The Wire, all of it's right up my alley, because what they show in The Corner hits my family so hard that, and stuff that I've dealt with in my family, that I just had to watch it. And so it was all fascinating to me, and it was all, I was just amazed when I watched The Corner. I was like, how does David Simon and Ed Burns, 2 white dudes, how do they know all this?
Right.
I mean, how? And that's what, because the number one thing I think about David Simon and Ed Burns, they're just so incredibly accurate and fair.
Yeah.
They just see the world so fairly, and so that's why I'm so impressed with them. But, for me, the Corner and all that was very personal, just because, it's like I felt like I knew a lot about my family and some of the issues that some people in my family dealt with, but now I was getting it a version, maybe a more honest version, because, when you're relying on them to tell you what's going on, they give you a sanitized version, and in The Corner, I got the truth.
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, The Sopranos averaged, I think, something like 8 million viewers. It got nominated for Emmys every year. The Wire had probably 1/6 of the audience. They didn't really get any Emmys or acclaim. Is this like a black-white thing, basically?
Well, I think that's part of it. I was talking to Robert Wool. He's a big fan of The Wire. And one of the things he pointed out to me was, he's like, Jason, when you base a show in Baltimore, if it's not in New York or L.A., the critics are going to dump on it. They're not going to give it its respect. And he goes, so some of it's territorial. It's just they're not in New York or L.A. shooting this thing, so just on that, they're going to get overlooked.
Well, the only thing about The Wire, though, with the critics is that starting with season 4, I think the critics really responded to it. I mean, they were basically hitting people over the head saying you have to watch the show, and people still didn't watch it, which I just think is crazy.
You know what, though? I'm going to say this about people not watching because, the ratings numbers this year are incredibly bad.
Well, but a lot of that has to do with the on-demand.
That's what I say. That's what I say. I don't know anybody that can wait all week to watch the show.
Right.
I got buddies that, don't have demand at their house. They come over to my house to watch it during the week. They'll bring their girls, whomever, but, so I don't know anybody that waits. And it also kills, it's I don't know why they experimented with this show, but one of the great beauties of television is, if you're trying to drive audiences, you have it on Tuesday night or whatever night, and all the radio talk shows talk about it the next morning, the next day. The Wire never gets that because people are watching it all week, until this final episode. Now Monday morning you'll be able to get up and go through the process of having morning talk shows talk about the final episode of The Wire, blah, blah, blah. But you never got that experience with this show the last 2 years. And so I think that's hurt audience.
I agree. The on-demand thing makes no sense to me. The only thing I can think is that maybe they're trying to drive traffic to their, they're trying to drive their viewers to on-demand to realize that they have all this stuff there. But you're talking about, now you have people spoiling the show 6 days before it's actually on. It splinters the audience. It makes the ratings look bad. I don't really see the upside.
But it's not I'll say this, as a fan, it's not as enjoyable to me. I wish that every Sunday night everybody I knew was watching it. That way, as soon as the show was over, we could get on the phone and talk about it, or we could talk about it the next morning at work or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't have that experience with this show.
And then it puts you in the position of, all right, maybe I'll wait till Wednesday, but then when it comes on Monday, you're just thinking about it the whole day. And then you end up getting sucked in and you watch it. I actually, I like having the option of watching it on demand on Monday, but I just think it's really hurt the show because
I'm amazed you can wait till Monday. I watch at midnight, which, it's Monday, but I literally start looking at 12:01. And
you start refreshing it?
Yeah, refreshing it. I can remember my buddy and his wife, they called me at about 12:20. Said, "We're getting screwed. They're not putting it up. They're not putting it up."
Right.
And so we all go to bed. And my phone rings at 12:37, and it's my buddy's wife, Leanne. "It's on. Get up, Jason. Get up." We get up and watch it, and then we're on the phone. And it was the episode. It was episode 9 that did this, and I was. When the thing with Michael and Dookie happened at the end of that episode, I was in tears.
Yeah.
And I called my mother lives in Indianapolis, so it was like 2:30, 3 o'clock in Indianapolis. I'm calling her like, "Oh my God, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen." Then my buddy down in Florida, him and his wife watched it, and we stood up and talked till 3 or 4 in the morning. So, but yeah, I can't wait until I wait until midnight and get up and watch it, and then probably watch it twice.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't do the on-demand because there is something to the whole thing about waiting the whole day for it to come on at, I don't even, because I'm on the West Coast, so usually it comes on, I think at 6 o'clock, the normal era, but just the anticipation, especially this one, 90 minutes, resolution for a lot of the characters. Although we've talked about this by email, I'm not convinced that this will be the last we see of these characters. I'm really not. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Wire movie, or even like 5 years from now they brought it back for a season, because I think that's one of the great things about the show is it didn't rely on, you didn't have the Tony Soprano character.
Right.
Like, I always thought, like, if you're going to make the argument about whether The Wire is one of the great shows of all time or not, what other show could have a character like McNulty, who was, the driving force of the first season and the second season, and then they basically de-emphasize him for the next 2 seasons. Like, no other show could do that. No other show has the luxury or the amount of rich characters that they could just take this guy and just marginalize him for 2 seasons.
Was he marginalized, I know in the 4th, but was he marginalized in the 3rd season too?
I thought he was.
He probably, Bunny Colvin was a bigger part of that season, so you're probably right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you look at the first, second season, you would call him the star of the show.
Right.
And then he kind of took
the
a back
third
seat
season was when Stringer got killed and McNulty was all sad. He finally busted him, but he got killed. Yeah, but you're right. They did. And then look, they killed, the guy that could have maybe taken the show, made it more mainstream, Stringer Bell.
Right.
They killed him. I mean,
right.
in the third season. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah, and in my opinion, one of the top 5 characters ever. Like, just the way the character was written, the way it was acted. I think the best character they've had in the show. I mean, I guess you could argue about that, but there's so many layers to it.
Stringer. I mean, you got these other people that think Omar is the greatest thing that ever hit.
Yeah, he's kind of like Kramer to me in Seinfeld. Like
I agree.
He's fun when he shows up. You love him, you need him, but I don't think he's really that crucial to anything that's going on.
And let me tell you what really happened, and not to criticize the show because hey, the show's great. This season has not been as good as others, and part of the problem, and it's still awesome. I don't want to think it's not awesome,
right.
but I didn't like anything about Omar's role this year. From the moment they brought him on screen down in the Caribbean or whatever, and he's feeding little kids candy, all that stuff seemed Hollywood to me. And then I still can't figure out, and love David Simon, greatest of all time, I don't understand why they had him jump off a 5th or 6th floor balcony and then just limper. Have him jump off the 2nd floor. I just don't understand what purpose that served, other than from the moment he survived that, I was just like, would you please just kill this guy and get it over with, because there's no way he should have survived that jump.
Well, it did lead to the great scene of the next episode, the opening scene with Marlo and Chris staring up at the balcony and trying to figure out how he made it out of there. But I agree with you. It was a little Hollywood, and I think even they would admit that Omar was always a fringe character, and maybe they beefed him up a little this year because he'd gotten so popular. But yeah, a little too much airtime. I also, what are the odds that somebody's going to be limping around with a broken leg like that for 2-3 weeks?
And shooting and killing people. I mean, that's, I'll say, and hindsight's 20/20. But from the moment Kennard said, "That's Omar."
Yeah.
It was like the one little kid could see, what's everybody running around scared for? Just pop this dude.
Yeah. I would have said up until the last 2 episodes that this was the second weakest season other than season 2, which I just really didn't like that much. But I thought it really redeemed itself the last 2 episodes were about as good as it gets. And episode 9 in particular, would you agree, one of the top 7 or 8 ever?
Without a doubt. What's troubling about this season, it hasn't been as good, but it's had some awesome moments. Joe's death.
Right.
There's been, Snoop getting killed, the Michael and Bug. I mean, there's been incredible moments, but here's my problem with this season and why people are down on it, and I agree with them.
Are people down on it? Is that official?
I think down on it may be too strong, but they reckon it's not as good, and it's because they did. I had no problem with them showing McNulty as a super rogue cop that was willing to do anything.
Yeah.
But they didn't have to do it with the homeless thing. He could have fabricated or sensationalized the bodies in the vacants from season 4.
Yep.
Why did you have to create this whole homeless thing that had no connection to the streets? That's when people get frustrated. It's the reason why you're a little lukewarm on season 2, is because when too much of the focus goes off the streets, you get frustrated. And so the Doc thing, some people didn't like because it took us too far away from Stringer and Avon.
Right. And D'Angelo.
And so I didn't have a problem with it because, at least, one, I thought it was, unlike you and maybe some others, I love the Ziggy character. I love the Nicky. They had the run-in with Cheese and Prop Joe and those East Side gangsters or whatever. So it was street enough for me. But this here, the homeless thing, and not having Scott Templeton and the whole newspaper have absolutely no connection to the streets.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what the motivation for the newspaper plot was, because the downside is that the show already had so many characters and so many plots that now you're bringing in 4 other big characters and a whole new plot that has nothing to do with any of the plots we've seen. And I guess what he was trying to do, I I've always thought The Wire was about the decay of Baltimore and how it got to where it was and why it's not going to get better. So to do that, season 1 is about how people get the drugs to one another. Season 2 is how the drugs come into Baltimore. Season 3 was about the ringleaders and how they keep their power and their turf and what they do. And season 4 was about the schools. And then this season was kind of about just the overall decay and how the politics, you're never going to save the city that way. The newspapers don't cover it correctly. And it's just a self-perpetuating thing that's never going to get better. So I guess the newspaper plays into that, but do you need it? I don't know.
Well, I thought you needed it, but what they should have shown, in my opinion, was show the newspaper improperly covering the drug war and the drug crime.
Right.
Instead they got him off on this homeless crap, and I guarantee you the reason why he didn't have the newspapers miscovering the drug war is because he was afraid he would be accused of being totally self-serving. And this is just a story about David Simon and why he got mad at the Baltimore Sun, because that was he went off and wrote that book Homicide,
right?
And felt like he was an expert on crime in Baltimore, and they wouldn't let him cover it the way that he wanted to. And so I think he felt like, well, if I focus in on that, everybody's really going to beat me up for just saying, okay, this is just payback and blah, blah, blah. And he's, it's the David Simon show.
Well, the other problem is The Wire is always one of those shows that you never know what's going to happen next. And you're always trying to connect the dots and figure it out. And with the Scott Templeton thing, it was clear from, I called it the first show that he was on. I said to my wife, like, they're doing the Jason Blair thing. Like, you just see it coming. And so now everything that's happened is playing out this whole Jason Blair scenario that I'm already kind of familiar with.
Well,
It's not taking me anywhere.
I'll be honest. It's not. David Simon based that character on someone he actually worked with, and for some reason I can't call the guy's name, but there was a actual Scott Templeton.
It's just like the whole theory of somebody in a smaller paper cheating to get ahead and try to get a big job.
But what the Scott Templeton deal, what he's really saying, though, is where Jason Blair was just some rogue that was just off doing his own thing.
Yeah.
Scott Templeton's a product of newspapers chasing contest awards.
Yep.
And they're going to end up protecting Scott Templeton, I would predict, in the final episode and telling Gus, okay, we'll buy you out or whatever, or demote you or whatever.
Hey, random tangent while we're here.
Yeah.
You're a big newspaper guy.
Yeah.
You still work for the KC Star. Where do you see this newspaper industry heading in the next 10 years? I know that's the $64,000 question, but I mean, do you really worry? Like, is the KC Star still exist in its current form 10 years from now?
Well, I think it's mostly online, and maybe it comes out twice a week in print form. And I work for a paper that just 5 years ago spent, I think, $250 million on a new printing press. And at the time, I mean, it was supposed to improve deadlines and all this other stuff, but I got to be careful. I
know you have to be careful, but it's a concern that everybody who works for a newspaper or loves newspapers has. Like, where is this headed in respect to the internet? Is the internet just going to swallow these newspapers up?
Well, they're never going to cover the local scene as well as a local newspaper can.
Right. The
problem you have at local newspapers, and this is what Simon's not pointing out, but it's all part of this whole contesting. Newspapers were so arrogant and making so much money in the 80s and the early part of the 90s that the editorial process didn't make good business sense. We're better off covering the local scene, but to win these awards that all these people were after, you made your newspaper more national, and you started writing about things. You decided the coverage from your little glass office inside whatever newspaper building, and you didn't let your readers dictate your coverage.
Right.
And so that's why we're dying. Now, can we go back to being the hardcore local newspapers that, we should have been from long ago, and will that make us valuable and make us be able to employ as many people as we used to. No, we're never going to employ the same number of people, but there's always, local newspapers are always going to be necessary. There's just going to be less of us doing it, and if you're in circulation, they're really going, you're probably really going to lose your job. And
well, you're one of the only people who has a national column and a local column at the same time that I can think of.
Right. No, and
so you must be getting different kinds of feedback from each column.
Yeah, I do two different sticks, and I tried to, it's a calculated thing because one, my newspaper thing is based on Mike Royko, and he was a hardcore local Chicago columnist, and I know he wrote some national things that got syndicated, but mostly he made his bones writing about Chicago politics. And then so I wanted to do something totally different on the internet and do more national topics, and so that's pretty much how I've kept it for the most part.
What do you find more satisfying?
I can't, there's no difference. I love being relevant locally. I love, having the local teams care about what I write, and the local athletes and fans care about what I write. And I like having people, if something happens nationally, I like people, saying, well, let me click over here to Fox to see what Whitlock has to say. It's the same deal. So they're both satisfied.
I grew up, always thinking I was going to write for the Boston Globe. And by the time I became of the age where that had a chance to happen, at the newspapers, it was just a case of so many people wanted to write sports that it was so hard to get in the door. The internet came along at the perfect time for me. But I always wonder what it would have been like had I gone in that direction, the more local kind of angle, if that would have been
But
more,
I'll tell you this, though, Bill, what you've done, though, and what people, you've gone national by being hardcore local to some degree, and you took that Boston stuff and made people like me care about it. And that's what people forget, is long before, I started working at ESPN or at Fox Sports and these other things, how I made my name was writing about the Kansas City Chiefs, the Kansas Jayhawks, and all that, and making people nationally take notice of what I wrote about the local deal. Right. That's what you've done with this Boston thing. And, man, you hit it at the right time, the Red Sox and the Patriots.
That's true.
Going so well. But you can't get better insight on the Red Sox and the Patriots than reading your stuff, and then you expanded that by no one watches the NBA, but I don't care whether you watch it that close or not. Reading your NBA columns are great because you know the league so well. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate the 1 minute long 1 minute long compliment.
But it's one of those deals where if you really know a subject and write it well, a guy that has no connection to whatever they'll find it and find it interesting and find insight that they can apply to their teams or whatever.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because I always get emails from people, and I'm sure you do too, from people in high school or college or people who are out of college, like trying to figure out how they can write about sports for a living, what they need to do, and do I have any advice for them? And, first of all, I just think people should read. I always say that, it sounds stupid, but the more you read, the better off, the more styles you read, the more different takes you read, it's just going to make you better. But the main thing that's worked for me has just been writing about stuff that I love and being passionate about it. And it sounds stupid, but it's true. Like, if you're passionate about a subject, no matter what it is, and you can get people to read that, then you've done your job, I think.
And you would be amazed. I'm just telling you, I don't follow, because I'm not a baseball person, but it's like I can read your Red Sox stuff. And it's hard for me to define why, but mostly it's because, damn, this dude is passionate about it, he's entertained about it, and he's informed about it, so I enjoy it.
I have 8 newspapers bookmarked, and one of them is the KC Star for you in Poznansky. I don't care about Kansas City sports.
Right, there it is.
In fact, I feel bad for Kansas City fans. I think you could argue you guys are that Kansas City might be, what do you think, top 3, top 4 most depressed sports city right now?
Yeah, it's It's up there. I'm trying to think of who's got it worse.
You're going to get a basketball team at some point.
I hope.
I think that's going to happen because I think they need that for. It's one of those community things where I think it would just be a good thing. It gives you a little more credibility.
We got that new arena, and we're trying. It's either going to be basketball or hockey.
Well, you have the basketball tradition. It's there. I mean, there aren't 5 colleges bigger than Kansas University, so it's. I mean, I'm sorry, I just had a screw up. Kansas City.
Well, Kansas is just 30 minutes from Kansas City, or 45 minutes.
Okay, all right, so I feel better. Yeah, I mean, you guys have. And
we got the College Basketball Hall of Fame right in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So yeah,
you guys should have a basketball team. I mean, if Memphis is going to have a basketball team, I think Kansas City should have it. Hey, we got sidetracked. Let's get back to the wire. Give me your predictions for. Is this episode 10?
Yeah.
Give me 4 predictions for episode 10.
Dude, my predictions have been so horrible that
they have been terrible.
I'm embarrassed to offer any of that.
I wish there was a way to gamble on your predictions against them.
The only thing that I've been remotely close to is I called early on in season 4. I said Michael is Avon, and
the next Avon.
Yeah, the next Avon. I thought and I still believe that what they were trying to say is Randy is going to be Stringer Bell or whatever. He's telling you where Stringer Bell came from. Blah blah blah. But other than that, my predictions have been horrid. But the only thing I really anticipate, and I'm prepared to be wrong about, I think that Marlowe gets killed, probably by the Russians, and that what they show is that Avon's relationship with Sergei in jail, he's going to be the guy calling shots from prison with Slim Charles, his representative on the street.
Interesting. So basically, we're back to where we started in the first episode. Avon is in control of the streets.
Yes.
And nothing has really changed. Yeah. What do you think of the Michaels, the Dookie and Bubbles, like the parallels of one guy's life going up? And I mean, do you think Dookie gets into drugs now?
That's what I think. That's what I think they could.
Because that's going to kill me.
Yeah, I mean, but I'll just say it's been foreshadowed. I mean, look what family he came from. I mean, he comes from a drug family, and what it also speaks to is he's a great kid. I mean, my God. I mean, hey, Bunny Colvin grabbed Naaman, who probably didn't deserve it compared to Dookie. This guy's got no options, and that's what was so heartbreaking about this whole deal. Is I'm looking at this guy. Oh man, I wish that I would bump into him, and he'd come live with me, and blah blah blah. But he's got no options, and here it is at the end of it. Michael's got this heat on him, and he's got to go live with junkies.
Yep.
In a barn for horses.
There's a really good TV critic. I think his name is Alan Sepinwall.
Yeah.
He writes for New York Star Ledger, maybe.
Yeah.
He had a really good piece after episode 9, and he was saying that he's convinced that this season and maybe this whole show is about people being trapped in Baltimore, and the fact that even if they want to get out, they don't know how. And maybe it's best that they don't get out. And he pointed to a scene that was really underrated from last year when Bunny took the kids to dinner, and they were all excited to go out for this dinner and hang out with people that be in this atmosphere that they'd never been in. And once they were sitting at the table, they just couldn't handle it, and it went terribly. And his whole point was like, whether they like it or not, this is where they live and this is who they are. I thought that was an interesting way to put it. I didn't put it as well as he put it when he wrote about it, but. About people being trapped there.
I agree, people are trapped, but I don't agree with, and maybe they're better off because they couldn't handle.
Well, I didn't mean better off. I meant like maybe they couldn't make it on the outside anyway. It's hard to. I don't want to make his point for him, but
right. Well, I'll just say this: just having lived some of those experiences, having. Taken a relative of mine that was in the gang lifestyle, getting him at 14 and him living with me from 14 to 16.
Right.
He embraced it incredibly and ran with it and was doing great. the beauty of season 4 to me was showing Naaman's mother and the peer pressure from family. You know, they didn't go all off into it, but my relative got swept up by his family back in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
It's just bottom line, didn't want to see him do any better. Didn't want anybody to be better than them, and they pulled him back in, and the kid is now 23 and sitting behind bars. And
yeah, and that, I don't know if you read, there's a book about Charlestown High School in Massachusetts called, oh man, I can't remember the name of it. It's by Neil Swidey. It's about the 2005 or 2006 Charlestown High Boston City championship team. And one of the stars of it is basically this exact same scenario. Like, he had a chance to get away, and the streets kept calling him back, and eventually he ended up in jail. And it just seems like it's one of those scenarios that we just keep seeing and seeing. With The Wire, the two success stories, I guess you'd call them, would be Naaman, who, on that debate team. That was startling to see him. And then I guess Bubbles, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two best-case scenarios for how to get out.
Do you know the real life Bubbles actually died, and so that's what he died. I think David Simon wrote his obituary or whatnot, and so I always thought that Bubbles was going to die, and thought that this guy, that black kid reporter, was going to end up. He thinks he's going to write this great feature, but it's going to turn into an obituary. But I don't know if he's going to be that sad, if he's going to make us go through this whole deal where we think, man, Bubbles has made it. And then deliver this curveball where, he ODs or something here on this final episode. I hope the hell that doesn't happen. I'll be so irate.
I don't want to cause a controversy here, but Bubbles has always been my least favorite character. And mainly because I never found anything uplifting or entertaining about him. Like, he came on and it was like he's a necessary evil to get the show to where it is, but I never enjoyed him.
Him and the white dude, the little white dude that was his buddy.
Yeah.
Remember when they got someone stuck them up and they had to walk down the street in just their underwear?
Right.
I mean, there's been all kinds. When they pulled that little scam with the guy and the ladder.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been all kinds of just little funny stuff.
I don't know.
I can't say. Now I will say I can't say he's my favorite character when he's not. I think a lot of people loved that stuff with him and Sherrod. Didn't do a whole lot for me. It was pretty good, but I never got all that invested in his relationship in season 4 with that kid Sherrod. So
yeah. Well, I guess what bothered me is that he seems to be the one who's always mentioned whenever I read anything about The Wire as, the best or one of the best actors on the show, and his remarkable performance as Bubbles. And I don't think he's any more or less remarkable than anybody else on the show.
No.
In my opinion.
No. I think he's good. But no, when I'm going to tell you the guy that I think is underrated.
Yeah.
Jamie Hector, Marlowe. I think this guy's played the hell out of that role.
He had a great scene in the prison last week.
Yeah, and just his whole he does more with less, and because he doesn't get a lot of lines, he doesn't talk for long periods. But his body language and all that other stuff. But all these guys, I think
my name is my name. I love that. By the way, the name of that book is called The Assist.
Okay.
And I highly recommend it. Where do you see McNulty going? We didn't talk about that. Jail?
Jail, eat a bullet, or maybe Lester saves him with whatever he's got on Levy, and just the police department always hates to be embarrassed, so.
Because I was thinking suicide, but then I read an article that he was hoping that David Simon would make a Wire movie. So then I was thinking, well, why would he hope for a Wire movie unless his character was still alive? There. Yeah, I'm always thinking of angles for The Wire. I would love to see. Here's my game plan for The Wire. I think they have a movie 3 years from now, and then I think they come back with season 6 in 2014. And Michael is now in charge of the streets. And you have some of the same characters left. Carcetti's long gone. But I think you could take like 6 or 7 of the characters you have now and like reinvent the show basically for a 6th season, right?
Would you love Clay Davis to be mayor?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many directions it could go. For me, The Sopranos was like, The Sopranos, what did they get, like 87 episodes out of it?
Yeah.
And it should have really been about 50. And there was so much fluff and so much padding and so many storylines that just went nowhere.
You could do the same number of seasons with The Sopranos, but you could cut out about 3 episodes a year.
Absolutely. 3? Yeah, I mean, you could cut out entire 4-episode arcs. Like, you could have, Vito Spatafor. That didn't need to be in there. They could have cut that whole thing out.
Absolutely. See, my theory, and no one ever agrees with me, I wrote it to Alan Sepinwall. I've asked other people, and they said, no, that's not an issue. I thought the whole Vito thing in The Sopranos was a deal where everybody's salary demands got so high on that show. And look, they paid Edie Falco, they paid Gandolfini. They couldn't pay everybody else. And so the guy that played Vito stepped up and said, hell, I'll take on more. I'll showcase myself and work for less. And that's why they had that arc for him.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, The Sopranos is one of those things, and we see this happen in sports and with comedians, and you tend to remember the good episodes,
right?
And you remember the best moments. But man, if you flick on A&E and you're just, there's a 50-50 chance you're going to come across an episode that's either not that entertaining or terrible, and you're like, wow, I forgot this episode. Oh, the Teamster episode, this was terrible. But and that's one of the reasons I would give the advantage to The Wires, because I just don't think they wasted any scenes. Everything had a purpose, and whether you agree with the purpose or not, the purpose was there. You know what I mean?
No, it's one of those deals where you literally don't want to blink because you could. Well, it's a show that you have to watch twice or 3 times because any detail could turn out to be very relevant later on. And you're right. Every scene had meaning and was relevant and just. Except for, I'm just saying, this season with the homeless deal, just like when they introduced politics into The Wire, I think some people were slow to catch on to Carcetti and the whole political angle. But once they connected Carcetti's run for, when he got the Democratic bid or whatever, and it was because the guy got shot in the street and they thought that they killed a witness and really it was just a random shooting. And I remember that Detective Ed Norris said, man, this guy gets to be mayor because some mope got shot accidentally. And, for the longest time they thought it was, Royce didn't protect this witness or whatever. So it just connected the political thing to the streets and to the drug game and how Carcetti and the politics were manipulating the police for the statistical gain, blah, blah, blah. And so we just accepted Carcetti and that whole deal into the Wire family, where the newspaper thing, they just haven't connected it to the streets, and that's a terrible mistake. But like I said, they've made up for it.
Well, I will say one thing about the newspaper arc, or whatever you'd call it. The guy who plays Gus is phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Off the chain.
Really one of the top 5 actors who's ever been on the show. And what has he been on? A Homicide?
Yeah.
He's been on other stuff.
Clark Johnson. I think he's actually written some episodes, too.
Man, that guy if that guy doesn't get nominated for an Emmy, then you know that the show has no chance to ever. I mean, it's just basically the Emmy committee is saying that they just have never watched an episode of this show. Say your thing before we go. Say your thing about how this season was about the kids, because I don't want to rephrase it for you. Your whole theory about this season.
The last 2 seasons, you mean in terms of, they took us through the first 3 seasons and told us about, Stringer and Avon, and I think they when Avon went to jail and Stringer died, I think most people were like, man, I wish they had told us who these guys were and how they came to be.
Yep.
And so they could have gone back in history and showed you flashback scenes, blah, blah, blah. But what he did, he said, no, I'm going to introduce you a whole new set of different characters, kids, and show you exactly where Stringer and Avon and Omar and Weebay, because, I think Kennard is Weebay. I'm going to show you exactly where they came from. And that's what they've done. And Bubbles with Dookie and all this other stuff. And so it's really, to me, enriched what this season's done and what The Wire does better than any other show is every season you watch it, to me, it enriches your enjoyment of the previous seasons. You understand more about the previous seasons. And so that's what they've done with the kids, and they've just, I think, and this is why I think this guy is incredibly fair, for the people far removed of any color that are far removed from the inner city. We meet the Stringer Bells when they appear in our newspaper or on TV, and they're these criminals and blah, blah, blah. And you wonder, well, how did they get there? How did that happen? And I think anyone that's watched this show from start to finish will have a new perspective on the people that do some of the heinous stuff we see on TV, or the people we wonder, well, why would they be drug dealers, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
This show has made you say, well, damn, maybe they didn't have any choice. Maybe, and so, and the other thing he's really subtly done this year, it's why they've shown Kima with her kid, shown McNulty neglecting his kid, Chris Partlow has a relationship with his kids. He's really tried to hammer you over the head with parenting is horrendous in America.
Well, and Lester sitting in the street with the mom who leaves her kid in the house by himself. Yeah, in
the front door so she can go holler at her girlfriend. They've been hammering us over here. Parenting. We don't parent our kids. We don't take care of them. We don't invest in them. And then you wonder why they make the choices that Stringer and Avon and these guys make.
And then on the flip side, Naaman, who was the one guy who had a parental figure in his life, ends up on the debate team wearing a jacket. Right. Yeah, that was a good way to put it. I think you did a good job at that. That sounded like Mad Dog. That's a good job by you, Jason. I think from the moment Avon gets out of jail in season 3 through season 4 is the greatest stretch of episodes in the history of television. And that is, I never like to make the overly strong statements, but I really think, like, you watch that first episode when Avon gets out, and you go all the way through to the last scene of season 4 with Naaman sitting on the porch with the intersection, which I love. Normally I don't love the over-the-top symbolism, like I hated the rat in The Departed. But I love the intersection. I just thought that was really well done. And I just think it's an amazing show. I wish, I think HBO, if they were smart, what they should do is just permanently put on demand the first 5 episodes. Because I think if people just watch the first 5, they'd want to watch episode 6. That's the best way to get more people to watch the show and to buy DVDs, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to let you go.
Appreciate it, man. Hey, real quick before we go.
Yeah.
We had that debate about the best scene of all time.
Oh, yeah.
And so here's the scene that I forgot, overlooked, but also maybe it's close to your scene. I think the best Stringer Avon scene is when Stringer cops to killing D'Angelo and they wrestle. That happened at the end of an episode. And those they ended up wrestling.
The fight.
Yeah, that's one of the most intense moments. And that whole, I rewatched that and said, damn, maybe that's the best Avon Stringer scene. So if you ever get a chance, watch that one again.
I'm with you. I watched it on YouTube after we had that discussion, and for some reason the balcony scene had blown me away, and I just forgot about the fight. But yeah, when they were about to get into it, it was about as tense as I can ever
And it
remember.
ended an episode. I remember when that episode ended, I was frantically dialing the phone. Oh, my gosh.
Right. I think the best thing you could say about The Wire is that this episode 10 will not end with Marlo and Avon looking at each other in a fade to black. We'll have resolution. All right, Big Sexy. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Come back on during the baseball season. We'd love to have you. We'll talk a little Royals if the Royals get going a little bit.
You don't want that.
All right, take care.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
So I get the sign off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.